Part 1. A Signal in the Void. The Eos, a sleek research vessel, drifted silently through the vast expanse of space. Its hull shimmered faintly under the light of a distant star, reflecting the endless void that surrounded it. Inside, the hum of machinery and soft beeps from control panels filled the air. The crew moved about their tasks with practiced precision, their faces illuminated by the glow of monitors displaying streams of data. Dr. Alara Voss sat hunched over her workstation, her sharp eyes scanning lines of code scrolling across her screen. She was an astrophysicist known for her relentless curiosity and knack for uncovering hidden patterns in the universe. Her dark hair was tied back into a loose bun, stray strands framing her face as she leaned closer to the monitor. Something had caught her attention, a signal unlike anything she'd encountered before. It had started as a faint blip, almost indistinguishable from background noise. Most scientists would have dismissed it as interference or a glitch, but not Alara. Over the past few days, she'd isolated the source, triangulating its origin to a desolate moon orbiting a dying red giant. What intrigued her most wasn't just the signal's persistence, it was its structure. Hidden within the static were mathematical sequences so precise they could only be artificial. And then there was something else. Embedded within the numbers were bursts of sound, melodic yet alien, like laughter echoing across the cosmos. Alara adjusted her glasses and turned to Captain Rennick, who stood nearby reviewing mission logs. "Captain," she said, her voice tinged with excitement, "I think we need to investigate this further." Rennick raised an eyebrow, his weathered face betraying skepticism. "Another anomaly? We've got enough on our plate already, Dr. Voss." "This isn't just another anomaly," Alara insisted, gesturing toward the screen. "Look at these patterns. They're deliberate. Someone, or something, is trying to communicate." Her enthusiasm was infectious. And after a moment of hesitation, Rennick nodded. "All right, but let's keep expectations low. If it turns out to be nothing more than cosmic interference, we're heading straight back to base." The journey to the moon took several hours, during which the crew prepared for whatever awaited them. Speculation ran rampant. Some joked about finding ancient alien ruins, while others speculated about encountering hostile life forms. Alara remained focused, replaying fragments of the signal in her mind, searching for meaning behind the strange sounds. When the Eos finally entered orbit around the moon, the landscape below revealed itself in stark detail. It was barren, its surface scarred by eons of meteor impacts and volcanic activity. Dust storms swirled lazily across plains of gray rock, and jagged mountains cast long shadows under the dim light of the red giant. Yet amidst the desolation, one feature stood out. A massive structure protruding from the ground like the spine of some long-forgotten beast. "It looks unnatural," muttered Lieutenant Theo Marks, the ship's pilot, as he guided the landing craft toward the site. His fingers danced over the controls with practiced ease, bringing them down gently near the base of the structure. As the crew stepped onto the moon's surface, their boots crunched against fine dust that clung stubbornly to their suits. The gravity here was weak, making every movement feel slightly exaggerated. Alara led the way, her helmet-mounted flashlight cutting through the gloom as they approached the structure. Up close, it became clear that it was no mere formation of rock. It was crafted, its surface etched with intricate carvings that glowed faintly even in the absence of sunlight. "Do you see this?" Alara asked, running her gloved hand over the markings. "These symbols, they're geometric, almost fractal-like. This is definitely intelligent design." Before anyone could respond, a low hum resonated through the chamber, causing the glowing glyphs to pulse brighter. Startled, the team exchanged wary glances. Then, without warning, a figure appeared at the far end of the room. She was small, no older than 10 by human standards, with luminous skin that seemed to shimmer between shades of silver and gold. Her large, almond-shaped eyes reflected the light of the glyphs, giving her an otherworldly appearance. She wore a simple robe-like garment that flowed around her as though stirred by an invisible breeze. For a moment, she simply stared at them, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, a warm, genuine smile that somehow softened the tension in the room, and whispered, "You're finally here." The words echoed in their helmets, translated instantly by the universal communication systems built into their suits. But before anyone could react, before any questions could be asked, the girl vanished as suddenly as she had appeared, leaving only silence behind. "What just happened?" Theo stammered, breaking the spell. Ilara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at the spot where the girl had stood, her mind racing. There was something familiar about those words, though she couldn't place why. It was as if the girl had been expecting them, as if she'd been waiting for centuries. "We need to find out what this means," Ilara said finally, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts spinning through her head. "Whatever this is, it's bigger than us." And so, with more questions than answers, the crew returned to the Ios, carrying with them the weight of an encounter that defied explanation. Little did they know this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and the universe. Trarid 2. Echoes of another time. Back aboard the Eos, the crew gathered in the main observation deck to debrief. The room was dimly lit, save for the soft glow of holographic displays suspended in midair. Each member wore an expression ranging from confusion to outright disbelief as they replayed the events on the moon. For many, the encounter with the mysterious girl felt surreal, like something out of a story rather than reality. Captain Rennick stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His deep voice cut through the murmurs of speculation. "All right, people, let's get one thing straight. We're scientists, not storytellers. Whatever happened down there needs to be analyzed logically. No wild theories until we have evidence." Ilara sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the glowing projections of the alien glyphs she had recorded during their visit. She hadn't said much since returning to the ship, but her mind raced with possibilities. Something about the girl's presence and her cryptic words stirred emotions she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't fear or excitement. It was more like recognition, as if part of her already knew who the girl was. "I don't think we can dismiss this so easily," Ilara finally spoke, breaking the tense silence. The structure, the glyphs, and especially the girl, they all seemed connected. And that signal we picked up? It wasn't random. Someone, or something, is trying to tell us something. Lieutenant Theo Marks leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "But why now? Why us? We're just a research vessel passing through uncharted space. If this is some kind of message meant for humanity, wouldn't it make sense to send it to Earth instead?" "That's assuming it's meant for humanity at all," interjected Dr. Mira Chen, the team's xenobiologist. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos of ideas swirling around the room. "For all we know, this could be a remnant of another species entirely. Maybe the girl was some kind of AI projection left behind by whoever built that structure." Ilara shook her head. "No, I don't think so. When she spoke, it felt personal, like she knew us somehow." The others exchanged skeptical glances. Personal? How could an alien child possibly know them? Yet none of them could deny the eerie feeling that lingered after meeting her. Even Captain Rennick, usually stoic and pragmatic, seemed unsettled. "Well," he said gruffly, "whether it's personal or not doesn't change the fact that we need answers. Dr. Voss, you've got access to the data. Start analyzing those glyphs and see if you can find anything useful. Everyone else, keep monitoring the ship's systems. Let's rule out any technical glitches before jumping to conclusions." As the meeting adjourned, Ilara retreated to her lab, determined to uncover the truth. Hours passed as she pored over the recordings, isolating patterns within the glyphs and cross-referencing them with known languages and mathematical sequences. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The symbols weren't just decorative, they were coordinates. "What does this mean?" she muttered to herself, tracing the lines of the projected map. The coordinates pointed to locations scattered across the galaxy, each marked by celestial bodies of varying significance. Some were planets orbiting stable stars, while others orbited black holes or drifted aimlessly in interstellar space. It was as if someone had created a treasure map spanning light years. Before she could delve deeper, strange things started happening aboard the EOS. At first they were subtle, an instrument panel flickering unexpectedly, a faint hum reverberating through the corridors. But soon, the anomalies grew harder to ignore. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation, and crew members reported hearing whispers when no one was nearby. More disturbing still were the sightings. Several crew members claimed to have glimpsed the girl in reflective surfaces, a fleeting image of her smiling face appearing briefly in windows or metallic walls. One night, unable to sleep, Alara wandered into the mess hall. As she reached for a cup of coffee, she caught sight of her reflection in the polished surface of the counter. For a split second, the Ata. Part 3. Following the trail. The EOS emerged from hyperspace near a lush exoplanet bathed in golden light. The sight was breathtaking, a stark contrast to the barren moon they had left behind. Thick clouds swirled lazily across its atmosphere, tinted with hues of green and blue. As the ship descended closer, the surface revealed itself to be teeming with life. Bioluminescent trees stretched toward the sky, their branches glowing softly, like lanterns. Rivers of liquid crystal snaked through vibrant plains dotted with flowers that pulsed with rhythmic bursts of color. It was as if the entire planet breathed with a life force of its own. "This place, it's incredible," murmured Dr. Mira Chen, her voice filled with awe as she studied the readings on her console. "The ecosystem here is unlike anything we've ever encountered. These plants, they're emitting energy signatures similar to those glyphs we found." Captain Rennick, however, remained cautious. "Beautiful or not, we stick to protocol. No one goes down there without proper gear, and we stay within communication range at all times." Alara nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the view outside the viewport. Something about this world felt familiar, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Perhaps it was the way the air shimmered faintly, almost inviting them to explore further. Or maybe it was the faint hum she thought she heard in the back of her mind, a sound reminiscent of the girl's voice. After suiting up, the team boarded the landing craft and touched down near what appeared to be an ancient structure, partially concealed by overgrown vegetation. Unlike the harsh angular design of the ruins on the moon, this building seemed organic, as if it had grown out of the land itself. Its walls were smooth yet uneven, covered in intricate patterns that glowed faintly under the planet's soft light. As they approached, Alara noticed something unusual. The carvings weren't static. They shifted slightly, rearranging themselves into new shapes every few seconds. She reached out tentatively, running her gloved hand along the surface. To her surprise, the wall responded, rippling like water before forming a series of symbols identical to those she'd analyzed aboard the EOS. "It's alive," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "This isn't just architecture, it's intelligent." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled lightly, startling the group. A low hum resonated through the structure, growing louder until it became almost deafening. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. In its place stood the girl, her luminous form materializing between two towering pillars. Her expression was calm but tinged with urgency. She looked directly at Alara, her large eyes reflecting both sorrow and hope. "You must listen," she said, her voice echoing gently in their helmets. "The fracture grows wider with each passing moment. You are the bridge, but you must hurry." "The fracture?" Alara asked, stepping closer. "What do you mean? Who are you?" The girl hesitated, her gaze flickering for a brief moment before returning to meet Alara's. "I am Silva, and I have waited longer than your kind can comprehend for someone like you." Before she could elaborate further, her attention shifted to the rest of the crew. Her tone grew sharper, almost pleading. "Do not linger here. This place holds answers, but also dangers you cannot yet understand." With that, she vanished again, leaving the team stunned and confused. "What did she mean by fracture?" Theo asked, his voice betraying unease. "And why does she keep talking about bridges?" "I don't know," Alara admitted, her brow furrowed in thought. but I think we'll find clues inside. Venturing deeper into the structure, the crew discovered a vast chamber illuminated by floating orbs of light. On the walls were murals depicting scenes of cooperation between humans and an alien species unlike any they had seen before. The beings resembled tall, slender figures made entirely of light, their forms shifting fluidly, as if constantly in motion. Together, they worked alongside humans, constructing cities and sharing knowledge. At the center of every mural was the same figure, Silva, depicted as both child and elder, surrounded by constellations. These look like records of history, Mira said, her voice trembling with excitement. It's proof of contact between our species and theirs. But when? Captain Rennick demanded. And where are they now? Ilara studied the images intently, her heart pounding. One particular scene caught her eye, a depiction of a great explosion, followed by a rift tearing apart the fabric of space itself. Surrounding the rift were countless versions of Silva, reaching out desperately as if trying to hold everything together. That must be the fracture, Ilara said quietly. Something caused a split, a division between timelines or dimensions, and somehow Silva has been holding it together. As they continued exploring, the ground shook violently once more, throwing everyone off balance. The glowing orbs dimmed, plunging the chamber into near darkness. Panic set in as the walls began to shift and close in around them. We need to get out of here, Theo shouted, grabbing his equipment. No, Ilara countered, her voice firm despite the chaos. There's still more we need to see. Ignoring the protests of her teammates, she sprinted toward a recessed alcove at the far end of the chamber. Inside, she found a pedestal adorned with a single glyph, one that matched the coordinates she had decoded earlier. Touching it triggered a holographic projection, showing a map of the galaxy overlaid with lines connecting various points. Each line converged at a central location marked by a pulsating symbol. This is it, Ilara breathed. The key to repairing the fracture, or whatever it is there. Before anyone could question her, the ground gave way beneath their feet, sending rocks tumbling into the abyss below. With no time to waste, the crew scrambled back to the landing craft, narrowly escaping the collapsing structure. As they lifted off, Ilara glanced back at the crumbling ruins, her mind racing with possibilities. Silva's warning echoed in her thoughts. Hurry! Whatever awaited them next, Ilara knew one thing for certain. They were running out of Part 4, Fractured Realities. The EOS continued its journey, jumping from one set of coordinates to the next, each destination revealing fragments of a story that spanned millennia. The crew's initial awe had given way to a growing sense of unease. Every location seemed to hold pieces of a puzzle too, vast for them to fully comprehend. Yet Ilara felt an unshakable pull toward uncovering the truth. Each new discovery brought them closer to understanding the mysterious fracture Silva had warned about, but it also deepened their confusion. At the fourth coordinate, they arrived at a planet unlike any they'd encountered before. Its surface was barren, gray and lifeless, but beneath the desolation lay remnants of civilization, ruins so ancient they seemed almost swallowed by time. The structures were massive, towering spires fused with crystalline formations that shimmered faintly even in the dim light of the planet's dying sun. It was as though two vastly different cultures had merged their architectural styles into something neither wholly alien nor human. This place, it feels wrong, muttered Lieutenant Theo Marks as the team disembarked from the landing craft. His voice carried a note of discomfort, and his hand hovered near the weapon strapped to his side. Ilara didn't respond immediately. She scanned the horizon, her eyes drawn to the jagged outline of the ruins against the pale sky. There was something hauntingly familiar about this place, though she couldn't pinpoint why. The air crackled faintly with static electricity, raising the hairs on the back of her neck. "Be careful," she said finally, her tone steady despite the tension in the air. "We don't know what we're walking into." As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the walls began to hum softly, resonating with a frequency that vibrated through their suits. Strange symbols glowed along the surfaces, pulsating in sync with the hum. These weren't just decorative. They were alive, shifting and rearranging themselves like liquid metal. Mira Chen, the xenobiologist, ran her scanner over the walls, her brow furrowed in concentration. These patterns? They're not random, she said after a moment. They're encoding information. Stories, perhaps. This whole place is like a library. Ilara nodded, her gaze fixed on the glowing inscriptions. Let's see if we can decode them. Using portable translators and advanced algorithms, the team worked together to decipher the messages etched into the walls. Slowly, fragments of a narrative emerged, a tale of unity and betrayal between humans and an enigmatic species known as the Luminari. The Luminari, beings of pure energy who existed across dimensions, had once formed a symbiotic alliance with humanity. Together, they had built civilizations that thrived on shared knowledge and mutual respect. But the harmony hadn't lasted. According to the murals, humanity's ancestors had grown greedy, seeking to exploit the Luminaries' ability to manipulate space and time. They had attempted to harness the Luminaries' power for conquest, believing themselves superior. The result was catastrophic. A rift tore through reality itself, fracturing timelines and scattering civilizations across the cosmos. The Luminari, unable to sustain their physical forms, dissolved into echoes of their former selves, trapped between dimensions. And then, there was Silva. In every depiction, she stood at the center of the chaos, her form both childlike and eternal. She was portrayed as a guardian, a being tasked with holding the fracture together while waiting for someone capable of repairing it. It's her, Ilara. Amon. Part 5. Shadows of Doubt. The convergence engine hummed with an intensity that made the very air vibrate. Its crystalline structure pulsed rhythmically, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the chamber walls. The light was almost hypnotic, drawing the crew's eyes to its core. A swirling vortex of energy where Ilara and Silva now stood, their forms partially obscured by the blinding glow. Ilara felt a strange sensation coursing through her body, as though she were being pulled in two directions at once. Her physical form remained anchored to the ground, but her consciousness seemed to stretch outward, reaching into realms beyond comprehension. Memories, not just hers, but fragments, of countless lives flooded her mind. She saw civilizations rise and fall, witnessed moments of unity and betrayal, and felt the weight of billions of years compressed into a single heartbeat. Silva's presence was steady beside her, guiding her through the overwhelming influx of sensations. "You are stronger than you realize," the girl whispered, her voice resonating like a melody within Ilara's thoughts. "Trust yourself." But not everyone shared Ilara's resolve. Chief Engineer Kale paced anxiously near the edge of the chamber, his hands clenched into fists. His face was a mask of frustration and distrust, his sharp features illuminated harshly by the pulsating light. He had always been skeptical of anything he couldn't quantify or control, and this situation pushed him far beyond his comfort zone. "This is madness," Kyle muttered under his breath, glancing nervously at Captain Rennick. "We're putting everything on the line based on some glowing kid's word? What if this machine doesn't repair anything? What if it destroys us all?" Rennick crossed his arms tightly over his chest, his expression unreadable. "It's too late to turn back now. Dr. Voss made her choice. All we can do is hope she knows what she's doing." Kyle shook his head vehemently. "Hope isn't good enough. We need answers, real ones. Not fairy tales about ancient alliances and cosmic fractures." He turned to Theo Marks, who stood nearby, his face pale with uncertainty. "Lieutenant, tell me you don't believe this nonsense." Theo hesitated, clearly torn. On one hand, he trusted Ilara implicitly. On the other, Kale's argument struck, a chord of doubt deep within him. I don't know," he admitted finally. "But if there's even a chance this could save us or anyone, we have to try." Kyle scoffed, throwing up his hands in exasperation. "Fine. Let's just sit here and watch while our brilliant scientist sacrifices herself for nothing." Brilliant. Plan. His words hung heavy in the air, sowing seeds of unease among the crew. Even Mira Chen, usually calm and level-headed, shifted uncomfortably. She approached Kale cautiously, her voice soft but firm. You think this is reckless, and maybe it is. But remember why we're out here. To explore, to learn, to understand things we can't explain. Isn't that worth risking everything for? Kyle shot her a glare, but didn't respond. Instead, he turned his attention back to the engine, his eyes narrowing as if searching for flaws in its design. Whatever doubts plagued him, they only seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. Meanwhile, inside the vortex, Ilara struggled to maintain focus. The memories flooding her mind were becoming more vivid, more demanding. She saw flashes of humanity's ancestors working alongside the luminary, sharing knowledge, building cities, forging bonds unlike any she'd imagined. But those images were quickly overshadowed by darker visions: greed, exploitation, destruction. She felt the pain of the fracture as though it were her own, a gaping wound in the fabric of reality, tearing apart timelines and scattering lives like dust in the wind. Through it all, Silva remained a constant presence, her voice gentle yet insistent. Focus, Ilara. You must align the threads, bring them together. How? Ilara asked, her voice trembling despite her determination. I don't know how to fix something this big. You already hold the key, Silva replied. Your connection to both worlds makes you the bridge. Trust your instincts. Ilara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She focused on the sensations coursing through her, the warmth of connection, the ache of separation, and willed herself to act. Slowly, tentatively, she reached out with her mind, grasping at the threads of fractured timelines. At first they resisted, slipping through her mental fingers like smoke. But then gradually she began to weave them together, creating fragile links between disparate realities. Outside the engine, the crew watched in awe as the vortex expanded, its light growing brighter and more intense. The ground beneath their feet trembled slightly, and the air crackled with static electricity. For a brief moment it seemed as though the universe itself held its breath. Then, without warning, the process faltered. A loud grinding noise erupted from the engine, accompanied by a shower of sparks. The light flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. Ilara stumbled backward, clutching her head as the influx of memories became overwhelming. What's happening? Captain Rennick shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. It's destabilizing, Mira cried, checking her scanner frantically. If we don't stabilize it soon, the entire system could collapse. Kyle seized the opportunity, his earlier suspicions boiling over into action. I knew it, he snarled, storming toward the control panel outside the engine. This whole thing is a disaster waiting to happen. If no one else has the guts to stop it, I will. Before anyone could react, Kyle activated an emergency shutdown sequence, overriding the engine's systems. The humming stopped abruptly, plunging the chamber into silence. The light dimmed, leaving only faint traces of residual energy. Inside the vortex, Ilara collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath as the connection severed. No, Silva exclaimed, her form flickering wildly. You mustn't interfere. Interfering? Kyle snapped, his face flushed with anger. I'm saving us from certain death. You've doomed us all, Silva countered, her voice laced with sorrow. Without the engine, the fracture will consume everything. Captain Rennick stepped forward, his tone firm and commanding. Stand down, Kyle. Now. For a moment it seemed as though Kyle might argue further, but seeing the steely resolve in Rennick's eyes, he relented, stepping away from the controls. His shoulders slumped in defeat, though his expression remained defiant. Ilara staggered out of the vortex, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her suit was scorched in places and her face was streaked with sweat, but her eyes burned with determination. We can still fix this, she said weakly, addressing the crew. But we need to work together. Silva materialized beside her once more, her form stabilizing slightly. There is another way, she said softly. But it requires greater sacrifice. Ilara nodded, already knowing what was coming. Tell me what to do. As the crew gathered around, Silva explained the final step, merging completely with the engine, becoming part of its infinite cycle. It wasn't just a temporary alignment. It meant giving up her individuality forever. Yet, despite the enormity of the decision, Ilara didn't hesitate. She understood now that the fracture wasn't just a rift in space-time. It was a reflection of humanity's failings, its inability to coexist peacefully with others. Repairing it required not just technical skill, but trust, empathy, and unity. I'll do it, she said firmly, meeting each member of the crew's gaze in turn. For all of us. No one spoke as she stepped back into the vortex, Silva joining her side once more. Together they merged fully with the convergence engine, their forms dissolving into pure light. The chamber filled with a radiant glow, and for a fleeting moment the crew felt a profound sense of connection, not just to each other, but to the cosmos itself. When the light faded, the fracture was gone. The universe breathed easier. Its wounds healed. And though Ilara was no longer among them, her legacy endured, a testament to the power of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bonds between stars. Their Part 6. Choices and Consequences. The chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of residual energy lingering in the air. The convergence engine stood motionless now, its crystalline surface dull and lifeless without the radiant glow that had filled it moments before. Ilara and Silva were gone, merged into the machine's infinite cycle, their forms dissolved into pure light. For a long moment no one moved or spoke. The weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on the crew, each person lost in their own thoughts. Captain Rennick broke the silence first, his voice low but steady. We need to secure the area. Make sure there are no further instabilities. His words were practical, almost mechanical, as though he were trying to distract himself from the reality of the situation. He turned to Theo Marks, who nodded and began running diagnostics on the engine with trembling hands. Mira Chen knelt beside the control panel, her eyes fixed on the readouts scrolling across her scanner. Her usual calm demeanor was shattered. Tears streamed silently down her face as she processed the enormity of Ilara's sacrifice. She saved us, Mira whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She gave everything. Kyle, meanwhile, stood apart from the others, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His expression was unreadable, but his clenched jaw betrayed the turmoil brewing inside him. He hadn't said a word since overriding the system earlier, and the guilt of his actions weighed heavily on him. Though he wouldn't admit it aloud, he knew deep down that his interference had nearly cost them everything, and perhaps still had. Ilara's final act of bravery left an indelible mark on. Part 7. Bridging the Divide. The journey back to Earth was quiet, almost contemplative. The EOS drifted silently through the vast expanse of space, its crew lost in thought as they processed everything that had transpired. Each member carried the weight of Ilara's sacrifice differently, but one thing united them all, a determination to honor her memory and ensure her efforts hadn't been in vain. Captain Rennick spent most of his time in the observation deck, staring out at the endless sea of stars. He replayed moments from their mission over and over in his mind. Their first encounter with Silva, the discovery of the Luminari Alliance, and finally, Ilara's selfless act. Though he didn't show it outwardly, those memories stirred something deep within him. For years he had prided himself on being pragmatic, on making decisions based solely on logic and necessity. But Ilara had reminded him of something far more important, the power of hope. Mira Chen, too, found solace in reflection. She often visited Ilara's workstation, running her fingers lightly over the notes and data files left behind. It wasn't just grief she felt, it was gratitude. Ilara had shown her that science wasn't just about cold facts. It was about connection, about understanding the stories written in the fabric of the universe. Mira resolved to carry that lesson forward, vowing to use her research not just for knowledge but for unity. Theo Mark struggled more openly with his emotions. He spent hours alone in the cockpit, staring at the swirling hyperspace outside the viewport. His friendship with Alara had been genuine, built on mutual respect and shared curiosity. Losing her felt like losing a part of himself. Yet even in his sorrow, he clung to her final words, "For all of us." Those 3 simple words became his mantra, a reminder that her sacrifice was meant to inspire, not devastate. Kyle, meanwhile, wrestled with guilt. Every time he passed the engine room or saw a flicker of light reflecting off the ship's walls, he remembered the look on Alara's face when he'd overridden the system. It haunted him, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to destroying everything. But instead of letting shame consume him, he channeled it into action. He began working tirelessly on new protocols designed to prevent similar mistakes in the future, pouring his energy into creating systems that prioritized collaboration over control. As the EOS approached Earth's orbit, Captain Rennick called the crew together for one last meeting before landing. The observation deck buzzed softly with the hum of machinery, the holographic displays showing star maps slowly fading to black. When everyone was seated, Rennick stood at the head of the table, his expression unusually soft. "We're home," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "But we're bringing back more than data and coordinates. We're carrying a message, a story about what humanity can achieve when we choose to trust, to reach out, and to connect." He paused, glancing around the room. "Alara gave us a gift. She showed us that the fractures in our world, whether between species, cultures, or even among ourselves, are not permanent. They can be healed, but only if we're willing to take the first step." Mira nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. "And we have proof now. Proof that humanity once worked alongside others, not as conquerors, but as partners. If we share this story, maybe we can inspire others to follow that path again." Theo leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "What happens next is up to us. Do we let fear divide us, or do we build bridges like Alara did?" Kale cleared his throat, his voice quieter than usual but sincere. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for what I did, but I promise to make amends, not just here but everywhere. I'll work to ensure no one else makes the same mistake." Rennick smiled faintly, pride evident in his eyes. "Then let's get to work. Let's tell the world what we've seen, what we've learned, and what we've lost. And let's remind them of what we stand to gain if we dare to believe in each other." When the EOS finally touched down on Earth, the crew disembarked to find themselves greeted by officials, reporters, and curious onlookers, eager to hear their story. Instead of retreating into isolation, they embraced the opportunity to share their experiences. Over the following weeks, they held press conferences, published papers, and gave lectures detailing their encounters with Silva, the Luminary, and the Convergence Engine. Their words sparked debates, inspired new initiatives, and reignited humanity's interest in reaching beyond its borders. Among the masses who listened to their story were scientists, politicians, artists, and dreamers, all moved by the tale of a woman who had bridged the divide between worlds. Slowly but surely, seeds of change began to take root. Collaborative projects sprang up across the globe, focusing not just on exploration, but on fostering understanding between diverse communities. Humanity took its first hesitant steps toward becoming something greater, not merely a species seeking dominion over the stars, but one striving to coexist with them. Yet even as life returned to normal aboard the EOS, echoes of Alara remained. Crew members reported hearing faint whispers in empty corridors or catching glimpses of glowing figures out of the corner of their eyes. Some dismissed these occurrences as tricks of the mind, while others believed they were signs from Silva, or perhaps Alara herself, reminding them to stay true to their mission. One night, months after their return, Captain Rennick stood alone on the observation deck, gazing at the stars. As he sipped his coffee, he heard a soft voice, barely audible yet unmistakably familiar. "You're doing well," it said, warm and encouraging. Rennick froze, his cup halfway to his lips. Turning slowly, he scanned the room, but there was no one there. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. "Thank you," he whispered finally, his voice thick with emotion. Whether it was Ilara, Silva, or simply his own subconscious speaking, he didn't know. And perhaps it didn't matter. What mattered was the message itself, a reminder that their journey wasn't over, that the bonds they had forged extended, far beyond the confines of time and space. As the EOS prepared for its next mission, the crew carried that message with them. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with uncertainty and obstacles, but they also knew they weren't walking it alone. Somewhere, amidst the infinite expanse of the cosmos, Ilara waited, her spirit woven into the very fabric of existence, a bridge connecting past, present, and future. And so humanity stepped boldly into a new era, guided by the lessons of those who had come before. The girl who waited among the stars had given them a choice, to remain divided or to unite. In choosing the latter, they proved that even the deepest fractures could be mended, and that hope, when nurtured, could illuminate the darkest corners of the universe.